Gee, it's getting like politics in America's only for the rich.
Who's been feeding you that commie crapola?
Andy has a girlfriend, Glenda. She's a weightlifter. Well, it's not like her neck is bigger than her head.
No.
Do you miss the applause? Do you miss the recognition?
No, because
After Rob Reiner's passing, the heartbreak didn't stop at the funeral. It only got heavier. What should have been a time of quiet mourning quickly turned into something far more painful. When the will was finally read, Roy and Jake were left completely stunned. The massive $200 million fortune, built over decades of success, respect, and legacy, had been donated entirely to charitable foundations. In that moment, grief twisted into something sharper. Shock turned into anger. According to reports, Jake couldn't hide his emotions, openly claiming that their parents had chosen the world over their own family. The sense of being cut out of their own story hit hard. Phones rang, lawyers were called, and just like that, a deeply personal loss exploded into a public legal battle that instantly grabbed headlines. As court proceedings loomed, one revelation after another began peeling back the layers of the Reiner family's private life. What the public thought they knew was only the surface. Behind closed doors, tensions had clearly been building, and now everything was spilling out into the open. Nearly 2 weeks after the devastating discovery on December 14, 2025, when Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner were found lifeless in their Brentwood home, the family was finally able to say goodbye. Once the Los Angeles County coroner completed the required examinations, a quiet and private farewell was arranged, far from cameras and noise. The couple's remains were released to their family, and by December 19th, official records listed their eldest son, Jake Reiner, as the informant on both death certificates and the individual who received their ashes. Documents from the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health confirmed that Rob and Michelle Reiner were laid to rest through cremation at Mount Sinai Mortuary. Mount Sinai Mortuary, a respected Jewish funeral home tucked into the Hollywood Hills, is known as the final resting place for many of Hollywood's most cherished figures. But this wasn't just any location. Mount Sinai Mortuary holds deep ties to the nearby Mount Sinai Memorial Park, a place steeped in history, legacy, and quiet reverence. Even in death, the Rainers' final chapter carried the weight of tradition, fame, and unresolved family pain. A sacred resting place, deeply respected by the Jewish community, where tradition calls for burial to happen swiftly and with dignity. Every step of the process honored centuries-old customs meant to bring peace to the departed and comfort to the living. Still overwhelmed by grief, Roy and Jake Reiner handled everything in complete silence. No press, no spectacle, no crowds chasing moments of sorrow. Just a small, tight circle of loved ones holding each other together as best they could. In a deeply emotional decision, Rob and Michelle's ashes were brought to Jake's home. A quiet, personal way for their children to keep their parents close during the darkest days of mourning. Sources close to the family said that at the time, no final decision had been made about a permanent resting place. Some believed the ashes might one day be scattered somewhere meaningful, while others said part of them could remain in the family cemetery. Everything was still uncertain, fragile even. But that fragile calm didn't last long. Not long after, cameras from major outlets like ABC News, Fox News, and NBC suddenly captured Roy and Jake entering a high-profile Beverly Hills law firm, one known for handling complex inheritance battles among Hollywood's elite. Dressed in dark clothing and sunglasses, they looked exhausted, drained, and visibly heartbroken. They didn't say a single word as photographers shouted questions non-stop. Those images spread fast, and once dramatic headlines about a possible $200 million inheritance dispute hit the internet, speculation went wild. People everywhere started asking the same thing. Why were the siblings meeting with lawyers so soon? Especially when there had been no official statement about asset distribution or even confirmation that the will had been formally opened. Roy remained completely silent, her eyes heavy with grief, while Jake walked slightly ahead, almost instinctively shielding her from the flashing cameras. Reporters pushed closer, shouting questions about inheritance rights, estate control, and legal authority. "Has the will been validated yet?" one voice echoed. "Who's managing the assets?" another demanded. The questions bounced through the cold hallway, sharp and relentless, completely disconnected from the reality that these were two people still mourning their parents less than 2 weeks after saying goodbye. The legal questions could wait, but the cameras clearly weren't willing to. A sacred resting place, deeply cherished within the Jewish community, where tradition calls for burial to happen swiftly and with dignity. Every step followed long-standing customs meant to honor life, loss, and respect for the departed. Still raw with grief, Roy and Jake Reiner handled everything in total silence. No media circus, no public spectacle, no crowds gathering for a glimpse of pain. Only a small, private circle of loved ones came together to say goodbye. In one of the most emotional gestures imaginable, Rob and Michelle's ashes were brought to Jake's home, a deeply personal way for their children to keep their parents close during the darkest days of mourning. Sources close to the family shared that, at the time, no final decision had been made about a permanent resting place. Some quietly suggested the ashes might one day be scattered somewhere meaningful. Others believed a portion could remain within the family cemetery. Everything felt delicate and unresolved. For a brief moment, there was calm, but it didn't last. Soon after, cameras from major outlets like ABC News, Fox News, and NBC caught Roy and Jake entering a high-profile Beverly Hills law firm, one well known for handling complex inheritance cases involving Hollywood's elite. Dressed in dark clothing and sunglasses, their faces told the story before words ever could. Exhaustion, heartbreak, and emotional weight. They didn't speak a single word as photographers shouted questions. The images spread across the internet in minutes, paired with dramatic headlines hinting at a possible $200 million inheritance dispute. That was all it took for speculation to spiral out of control. People everywhere started asking why the siblings were meeting lawyers so soon, especially when there had been no official announcement about asset distribution or confirmation that the will had even been formally opened. Roy remained completely silent, her eyes heavy with grief, while Jake walked slightly ahead, almost instinctively shielding her from the flashing cameras. Reporters swarmed closer, demanding answers about inheritance rights and who would control their parents' estate. "Has Rob Reiner's will been validated yet?" one journalist shouted. Another pressed, asking who would manage the assets while everything was sorted out. The questions echoed down the cold hallway, sharp, relentless, and painfully disconnected from the reality that these were two people still mourning their parents less than 2 weeks after their passing. And then, just when it seemed the story couldn't grow more emotional, new information dropped like a bombshell. A source close to the family revealed something almost no one saw coming. Rob Reiner had reportedly made plans long before his passing, directing nearly all of his estimated $200 million fortune toward charitable foundations. In an instant, the narrative shifted. What looked like a legal scramble now carried a deeper, more complicated emotional weight, one rooted not just in money, but in legacy, values, and a final decision that would change everything for the family left behind. The revelation didn't explode right away. It crept out quietly. But the shockwaves were impossible to ignore. According to a longtime family friend, Rob Reiner's decision wasn't rooted in rejection, bitterness, or distance. It came from a belief system he'd lived by for decades. To Rob, real strength meant standing on your own 2 feet. He believed that too much inherited money could trap a person, dull their hunger, and slowly steal their sense of purpose. That same friend shared that Rob spoke often about independence, almost like it was a personal rule of life. He believed his children, Jake, Romy, and Nick, needed to build their own paths. But his reasoning wasn't one size fits all. For each child, his thinking was deeply personal and intentional. When it came to Nick, who had faced personal struggles over the years, Rob believed that comfort could actually hold him back. In Rob's mind, stepping into the real world, without a financial safety net, might be the only way for Nick to grow stronger and gain clarity in his own life. He felt that protecting him forever would only delay the lessons that life itself was meant to teach. Rob once explained that shielding Nick from consequences would mean he'd never truly understand responsibility. A close friend later revealed Rob's thinking bluntly. Giving a massive inheritance to someone already battling emotional challenges felt to him like adding pressure instead of relief. He believed growth came from effort, discipline, and facing reality head-on, not from money handed down without struggle. Jake and Roy were different. Rob saw in them the independence he had always admired, the ability to stand tall without leaning on anyone else. Jake already had a stable career and a life he built himself. Roy was deeply immersed in her creative work, steadily carving out her own lane with passion and focus. To Rob, both had already proven they didn't need inherited wealth to define their value. He would even joke to friends, saying, "My kids can handle it. They're stronger than people think." For Rob Reiner, success was never about how much money a parent left behind. It was about whether their children could keep moving forward with purpose, integrity, and strength long after he was gone. That's why, long before his passing, Rob Reiner made his intentions unmistakably clear. Nearly all of his estimated $200 million fortune was destined for charitable foundations. In his eyes, money was meant to keep working for society, not sit idle as a false sense of comfort that could weaken the next generation. And this wasn't just talk. He put those beliefs into action. Sources close to the family revealed that Rob personally assigned Roy the responsibility of selling their Brentwood home along with other properties. Every dollar from those sales was to go directly into the charitable foundations he had carefully selected. These weren't random choices either. The organizations reflected causes Rob and Michelle had supported for years, including education, healthcare, and vital social programs. To him, this was legacy with meaning. One longtime family friend recalled an ordinary conversation that later felt hauntingly prophetic. Rob had said, "Parents don't live to pave the road for their children. Parents live to teach them how to walk on their own." That belief guided him to the very end. He knew his kids might feel hurt, even betrayed, but he trusted that one day they would understand the lesson behind his choice. But when tragedy finally struck, that philosophy became painfully complicated. Regardless of whether Nick was legally excluded from inheritance rights due to the investigation surrounding him, the reality was brutal. None of the children were left a single cent. That truth hit Jake and Roy hard. According to sources close to the family, what followed wasn't just legal paperwork. It was heartbreak turning into resistance behind closed doors. Inside a Beverly Hills law firm, the siblings reportedly confronted lawyers in disbelief. Roy, overwhelmed by emotion, allegedly broke down in tears saying, "This isn't fair." Jake's reaction was far more explosive. In a moment of raw frustration, he reportedly said, "They chose to take care of the world, but forgot about their own children." Those words weren't driven by greed. They came from deep emotional pain, from the feeling of being left behind by the very parents who had raised them to believe in compassion, fairness, and family above all else. What was meant to be a final act of purpose had instead reopened wounds that no amount of money could ever heal. They weren't angry about charity itself. That was never the issue. What cut deepest was the feeling of being erased from their own family's story. Determined to fight back, Jake and Roy Reiner began exploring every possible legal path to challenge the will. Timing, trust structures, obscure clauses, nothing was off the table anymore. Before long, they assembled a heavy-hitting legal team known for navigating Hollywood's most explosive inheritance wars. Leading the charge was Daniel Kraus, famously known as the man who overturns unshakable wills, alongside Evelyn Hartman, a specialist in charitable trust disputes. Their very first meeting was thick with tension and emotion. Kraus didn't sugarcoat it. He reportedly warned them, "If you want fairness, this will be a long and very difficult fight." Jake didn't blink. "We're not afraid," he shot back. "We've already lost everything." Witnesses later said that moment felt final, like a decision made from the heart, not the head. From there, the legal strategy snapped into focus. The plan was bold. Challenge the charitable foundations directly, arguing they had effectively severed the biological children from their parents' legacy. Behind closed doors, the siblings' intentions became crystal clear. This wasn't about receiving a portion or negotiating a settlement. They wanted everything brought back to the family. Roy, quieter but just as firm, reportedly said, "I don't want a portion. I want it all. They're gone, and we've been left with nothing." Her words carried grief, not greed, a deep sense of abandonment that refused to stay silent. Their attorneys issued a serious warning. Taking legal action against public charities could trigger massive backlash and potentially damage Rob Reiner's reputation, but Jake stood his ground without hesitation. "Public opinion isn't my family," he said. That one line captured the emotional storm tearing through the Reiner household, a brutal collision between principle and pain. From that point on, the legal team began digging deep. They gathered personal journals, old emails, handwritten notes, and fragments of Rob's private reflections. Anything that might suggest his final decisions didn't fully represent his emotional state at the end of his life. Krauss reportedly told them, "This isn't just a lawsuit about money. It's a fight to redefine what your father's legacy truly means." And that's what this had become. Not just a courtroom battle, but a deeply personal war fought inside the heart. Love clashed with grief. Respect collided with resentment. The very values Rob had preached for years, independence, accountability, self-reliance, had now become the spark fueling his children's rebellion. For Jake and Roy, this was no longer about lessons or philosophy. It was about loss, identity, and reclaiming a place in a story they felt had been taken from them. It was never really about the money. It was about the ache of never getting the chance to ask why before it was too late. While the outside world continued to celebrate Rob Reiner as a symbol of compassion, justice, and generosity, inside the family walls, something was quietly unraveling. The same ideals he lived by were now tearing his family apart. Rob always believed his children would understand one day, but that day never came in time. One family friend shared the truth with heartbreaking honesty, saying Rob left this world before ever hearing his children say they weren't ready. And just like that, the story of Rob and Michelle Reiner's will became something far deeper than a legal dispute. It turned into a painful reflection of love, legacy, and loss. A reminder that even the purest intentions can leave behind wounds no inheritance can ever heal. For decades, Rob and Michelle Reiner had been admired as one of Hollywood's most socially conscious couples. Their passion for helping others wasn't performative. It shaped their entire lives. From championing early childhood education to standing for equality and human rights, everything they did pointed outward, toward the greater good. That commitment wasn't accidental. It was intentional and unwavering. Their most ambitious creation, the I Am Your Child Foundation, stood as a living monument to those beliefs. It wasn't just a nonprofit. It was proof that their compassion had always gone far beyond words. At the time, the foundation was groundbreaking, focusing on the crucial developmental years between birth and age 3, a period many policymakers had long overlooked. Through powerful educational films like I Am Your Child, The First Years Last Forever, featuring respected voices such as Tom Hanks and Oprah Winfrey, the message reached millions of American families. It changed how an entire generation of parents understood early learning, emotional growth, and the lifelong impact of those first few years. The ripple effect was massive. Building on that success, Rob pushed even further. He launched Parents Action for Children, an advocacy group designed to bring neuroscience and child psychology directly into public policy conversations. His vision was bold and relentless. To convince California lawmakers that investing in young children wasn't optional, it was essential. Long-term support for low-income families wasn't charity in his eyes. It was responsibility. Michelle worked tirelessly behind the scenes, connecting donors, legislators, educators, and experts. She made sure every piece aligned, every voice was heard, and every detail mattered. Together, they weren't just advocating, they were building a movement. One of their most impactful milestones came with Proposition 10, a campaign that would forever shape how California approached early childhood development. And yet, as the world applauded their legacy, their family was left grappling with the emotional cost of a life devoted to everyone else. A legacy built on generosity, and a reminder that even greatness can come with quiet heartbreak. Rob's commitment to change didn't stop at speeches or donations. He pushed for action. He helped lead the charge to place a small tax on tobacco products, with every dollar directed toward First 5 California, an initiative focused on healthcare, education, and the overall development of children under the age of 5. The results were staggering. Billions of dollars were invested into helping young children thrive, and many still consider it one of the most successful examples of activism and policymaking coming together to create real, lasting social change. And Rob's drive for equality didn't end there. He went on to co-found the American Foundation for Equal Rights, a group that played a pivotal role in challenging laws that once restricted marriage rights in California. That fight eventually reached the highest court in the country, leading to the historic 2015 Supreme Court ruling that made marriage equality the law of the land across the United States. It was a victory that reshaped history. While Rob often stood at the front of these movements, Michelle was the strategist behind the scenes, the quiet force making everything work. She coordinated press outreach, mobilized artists, and made sure every campaign carried heart, not just headlines. Together, they operated like a perfectly aligned team. Beyond their own organizations, the couple consistently supported countless causes: public education, mental health programs, and organizations helping people rebuild their lives after recovery. Yet most of these contributions never made headlines. Rob firmly believed that real charity didn't need applause. Impact was enough. Even through filmmaking, Rob found ways to blend art with activism. His movies often carried powerful messages about empathy, humanity, and moral courage. He regularly hosted charity screenings, turning red carpets into fundraisers for community programs ranging from early childhood education to civil rights initiatives. Michelle, as a producer, became the ideal partner in that mission, seamlessly bridging creativity and compassion into a single purpose. Few people realized that Rob and Michelle also served on multiple advisory boards for community development programs across California, particularly those focused on child welfare and early education. They didn't just lend their names, they gave their time, energy, and hearts. Rob and Michelle weren't symbolic figures sitting on advisory boards for appearances. They were deeply involved. They attended long meetings, pored over dense reports, questioned every budget line, and pushed for accountability, all to ensure every dollar truly went where it mattered most. Their legacy wasn't built on fame alone. It was built on action, sacrifice, and an unshakable belief that change only happens when people show up and do the work. Over the years, Rob and Michelle also poured millions into political causes, hosting high-profile Hollywood fundraisers for figures like Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. At one point, Rob even seriously considered running for governor of California, a move that could have changed his life completely. But in the end, he stepped back, deciding his true calling wasn't politics. It was advocacy and storytelling. For Rob, family and principles always came before personal ambition. And when national issues demanded attention, he never stayed silent. In 2017, he co-founded an independent committee focused on investigating election-related concerns, once again stepping into the public arena when he felt it mattered most. Michelle stood firmly by his side through every effort, every challenge, every late-night discussion. Together, they also co-produced hard-hitting documentaries like God and Country, which examined the growing intersection of faith and political influence in modern America. These weren't safe projects. They asked uncomfortable questions and sparked real conversations. Their impact wasn't measured just in donations or headlines. It was written into lasting change. Millions of children across California gained access to better early education. Countless couples finally received equal rights recognition. And through years of relentless advocacy, progressive ideas found a louder, more powerful voice in Hollywood and beyond. So when news broke that Rob planned to donate nearly all of his wealth to charity, those who truly knew him weren't surprised at all. It wasn't shocking. It was on brand. Rob Reiner's generosity was never about luxury or excess. It was about purpose, responsibility, and leaving the world better than he found it. But that revelation raised a new question. How did he build such an extraordinary fortune in the first place? The answer traces back to a lifetime of relentless dedication to entertainment and storytelling. Rob's journey began in front of the camera, with his breakout role on the iconic television series All in the Family. That role turned him into a household name and laid the foundation for everything that followed. But the true engine behind his legacy and his wealth was his work behind the camera. As a director and producer, Rob delivered hit after hit, reshaping American cinema along the way. Films like When Harry Met Sally, Misery, A Few Good Men, The American President, and Stand By Me weren't just box office successes. They became cultural landmarks. Each project reinforced his reputation as a storyteller who understood humanity, emotion, and truth. And it was that rare talent that ultimately built the fortune he later chose to give away for something far bigger than himself. Over the years, Rob and Michelle poured millions into political causes, hosting high-profile Hollywood fundraisers for names like Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. These weren't quiet dinners. They were power-filled rooms where influence, money, and ideas collided. At one point, Rob even seriously considered running for governor of California himself. But in the end, he stepped back. Politics wasn't his true calling. Advocacy and storytelling were. For Rob, family and principles always came before personal ambition. And when national issues demanded action, he never stayed silent. In 2017, he co-founded an independent committee focused on investigating election-related concerns, stepping directly into one of the most tense moments in modern American history. Michelle stood firmly beside him through every move, every backlash, every late-night decision. Together, they also co-produced documentaries like God and Country, projects that boldly examined the collision between faith and political influence in modern America. These weren't safe or comfortable topics. They were challenging, provocative, and impossible to ignore. And their impact wasn't just measured in donations or headlines. It showed up in real outcomes. Millions of children across California gained access to stronger early education programs. Countless couples finally received equal rights recognition. And through years of relentless advocacy, progressive ideas gained a louder, more confident voice in Hollywood and far beyond it. So when word spread that Rob planned to donate nearly all of his wealth to charity, those who truly knew him weren't surprised at all. It fit perfectly with the life he had lived. Rob Reiner was never about luxury for luxury's sake. His generosity was about purpose, responsibility, and leaving something meaningful behind. But that revelation sparked another big question. How did he build such an extraordinary fortune in the first place? The answer goes back to a lifetime of relentless dedication to entertainment and storytelling. Rob's journey began in front of the camera, with his breakout role on the iconic television series All in the Family. That show turned him into a household name and gave him the foundation to launch what would become a legendary career. But the real engine behind his wealth and his legacy was his work behind the camera. As a director and producer, Rob delivered hit after hit. Films like When Harry Met Sally, Misery, A Few Good Men, The American President, and Stand By Me weren't just cultural landmarks, they were box office gold. At the height of his success in the late 1980s and 1990s, Rob was reportedly earning directing fees in the tens of millions per film. On top of that came back-end profit shares that kept paying out long after the movies left theaters. That rare mix of creative vision and sharp business instincts transformed Rob Reiner from a beloved actor into one of Hollywood's most financially powerful storytellers, a man who mastered both art and leverage. That relentless drive is exactly what transformed Rob Reiner into one of Hollywood's most respected filmmakers and built the massive fortune that would later sit at the center of one of the industry's most emotional inheritance battles. But the real financial turning point came in 1987 when Rob co-founded Castle Rock Entertainment. That single move changed everything. Castle Rock quickly exploded into a Hollywood powerhouse, producing legendary projects that reshaped pop culture, including Seinfeld and The Shawshank Redemption. These weren't just successful shows and films. They became timeless staples, watched across generations. When Castle Rock was later sold and restructured in the early 1990s, Rob walked away with a massive payout thanks to his ownership stake. That deal marked the single biggest leap in his personal fortune. But Rob didn't rely on Hollywood checks alone. He played the long game. A huge portion of his wealth came from smart, strategic real estate investments across Los Angeles. In 1991, he purchased his primary residence, the now famous Brentwood Mansion, from Norman Lear for roughly $4.75 million. Today, that same property is estimated to be worth between $10 million and $13.5 million, And that was just the beginning. Rob also owned a stunning beachfront villa in Malibu's ultra-exclusive Colony area. Bought in the 1990s for around $4 million, the property later soared in value, reaching as much as $20 million during peak market seasons. At times, it was reportedly rented out for up to $150,000 per month. That's Hollywood real estate at its finest. His portfolio didn't stop there. Rob owned several luxury homes throughout Beverly Hills and other prime Los Angeles neighborhoods. As the Hollywood property market boomed, those investments multiplied in value, locking in his financial security for decades. Every move was calculated, quiet, steady, and powerful. But real estate was only one piece of the puzzle. Rob's creative legacy kept paying him year after year. Iconic films like This Is Spinal Tap and When Harry Met Sally never stopped working for him, airing worldwide, streaming across platforms, and continuously generating royalty checks. Each payment might have seemed modest on its own, but over time, they stacked up into a serious fortune. One of Rob's proudest late-life victories came from finally resolving the long-running copyright dispute over This Is Spinal Tap. That settlement gave Rob and his co-creators greater control over both their creative work and the financial rewards tied to it. It wasn't just symbolic, it was practical. The deal strengthened his long-term income and cemented his belief that creators deserved ownership over their work. By the time his final years arrived, Rob Reiner wasn't just wealthy. He was secure, intentional, and purposeful. Every dollar, every deal, every decision reflected a lifetime of smart choices. Choices that ultimately made his final act of generosity possible and unforgettable. Even outside the entertainment world, Rob Reiner handled his money with precision and care. He kept a diverse investment portfolio, stocks, long-term assets, and steady holdings. Not flashy, but smart. These weren't his main moneymakers, but they kept his fortune solid during periods when he stepped back from directing. Stability mattered to him. What many people never fully realized was just how deeply Michelle Singer Reiner was involved in all of it. She wasn't just his partner in life, she was his partner in strategy. Michelle co-produced films, advised on creative risks, and helped guide major financial decisions behind the scenes. Her steady influence protected the family from the financial traps that quietly swallow so many Hollywood legends, from All in the Family to Castle Rock Entertainment. From blockbuster films and lifelong royalties to prime real estate in Brentwood and Malibu, Rob built an empire estimated at around $200 million. It was the result of 5 decades of imagination, persistence, discipline, and love for storytelling. And yet, the irony is impossible to ignore. That very fortune, born from creativity and purpose, became the center of profound heartbreak. When Rob's will was revealed, it landed like a thunderclap. His entire estate, the product of a lifetime of work, was left not to his children, but to charitable foundations and causes he believed could change the world. To the public, it looked like a noble, selfless act, a man giving everything back to society. But to his children, it felt like distance, like being left outside their father's final embrace. Was Rob teaching independence through sacrifice? Or was the decision shaped by years of emotional separation that no amount of money could ever fix? Those questions still hang heavy in the air. Was Rob Reiner's final act one of ultimate compassion or quiet heartbreak? Was it wisdom or misunderstanding? Maybe it was both. What's certain is this: his story reminds us that legacy isn't just about wealth. It's about connection, timing, and the words we never get to say. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end, a story filled with vision, ideals, and unspoken pain. Now we want to hear from you. What do you think about Rob Reiner's final decision? Can love and legacy clash, even with the best intentions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories about powerful families, hidden truths, and legacies that refuse to fade. And don't forget to turn on notifications, because some stories, even after the final page is turned, never truly end.